This video is to discuss your right to travel or drive. Many people have asked me, how do you deal with certain issues regarding driving or vehicle registration? And this video applies mainly to people within the United States, but could also be adapted to other places around the world at the same time. If we want to look at the right to drive, we need to first look at various words to see what they mean. So if we look up the word automobile, it says a vehicle for the transportation of persons or property on the highway, carrying its own motive power, not operated upon fixed rails, basically, fixed tracks. Okay. The other thing, it says a wheeled vehicle propelled by gasoline, steam, or electricity. And then give you a couple of court cases. A self-propelled vehicle suitable for use on a street or roadway. Okay, a vehicle designed mainly for the transportation of persons equipped with an internal combustion hydrocarbon vapor engine, furnishing motive power and forming a structural portion thereof. So they give a couple of different cases here. Now, automobile seems like it should be usable. It seems like that should be a usable word to describe your mode of transportation. Okay? But it says on the bottom here, it is a generic term covering both trucks and passenger cars. And it gives a court case. Now here becomes the problem. This is why I said in one of my earlier presentations, we need to look at all the words in a document before we render a verdict, yes or no, whether we can use it. Because the term passenger car, or specifically passenger, is actually commercial. It's one paying for hire, basically. If we look at the word driver, it says one employed in conducting and operating a coach, carriage, wagon, or other vehicle with horse, mule, or other animals, or a bicycle, tricycle, or motor car, though not a street car or railroad car. A person actually doing the driving, whether employed by his owner to drive or driving his own vehicle, meaning your own vehicle for hire. So do you in fact need a driver's license? Well, the answer is no, because you're not being employed, okay? And as per this definition, you can be employed driving someone else's vehicle, such as if you were driving a bus or a taxi cab or a rental truck or a delivery truck for some company, FedEx, UPS, DHL, DSP, any of those companies, you're driving somebody else's vehicle. But at the same time, you could also be operating your own vehicle, such as an Uber vehicle. In some cases, people do use their own vehicles, in which case you are technically being employed, so you would require a driver's license. However, if you are making use of your own private property to get you from A to B, then you are not being employed, therefore you do not need a driver's license. The same goes through with the word operator. It's not included here, but operator is commercial. Now if we look at the word passenger, as I said here, it says passenger, a person whom common carrier has contracted to carry from one place or another. Therefore, you can't have a passenger vehicle, because passenger, as they'll designate it, means somebody who's contracted. So if you have a passenger, it is assumed that that person has paid you to move them from one location to another or to transport them. So you do not have a passenger vehicle. Now in Canada, for example, passenger vehicles have a white license plate with blue numbers. However, a truck is always classified as commercial, therefore it is a white license plate with black numbers. So it seems that we have a problem. The word vehicle is the problem. So the question becomes, well, what do I do? Because the police officer will say, step out of the vehicle, right? And your vehicle has a VIN number, vehicle identification number. So to solve this problem, you would have to turn around and notify your licensing authority, which could be Service Ontario, or it could be the Department of Motor Vehicles for your particular state, or it could be DVLA, which is the Driver Vehicle Licensing Authority. Notice I said driver vehicle, DV, and then LA, Licensing Authority. So you're not a driver and you're not in a vehicle, because vehicle is commercial, driver is commercial. Notify DVLA, if you wish to challenge this in the UK, that you are not making use of any sort of vehicle. It is a private automobile or private conveyance. Even conveyance has negative things attached to it. In one particular case, when I dealt with a police officer, I told him it was a time machine. He looked at me like, okay, what turnip truck did you fall off of? I said to him, very simple. I pointed to the direction I was headed. I said, now if you walk, you're going to get to that location, certain address, in a specific time frame. I, on the other hand, who use this machine, will get there a lot faster. Therefore, it is a time machine. Now, some might say that's a smart-ass comment, and I can appreciate that. But given the fact that all words have duplicate or triplicate or multiple meanings, you have to be very careful in how you respond. The solution is to label everything that you have as private. If we look at the word private, it says affecting or belonging to a private individual as distinct from the public generally. So therefore, if you are a private individual and not a person, as they will label you to be a person, right? You correct your status by telling them and informing them in writing, and if you have to on the side of the road, that you're a private individual using your private automobile. That eliminates the fact that you are commercial, because you've designated it private, and I would also put private, non-commercial sticker or placard on your dash to cover up your VIN number. This way they can't locate your VIN number and identify it as a public vehicle. Then you would notify DVLA or the Service Ontario branch or your Secretary of State that you do not use your vehicle commercially and therefore you are claiming an exemption. Right? And you're no longer subject to their rules because you're not engaged in commerce. Now, if we look at the word traffic, traffic says commerce, trade, sale, exchange of merchandise, bills, money, and the like. That's all we need to go. It says the passing of goods or commodities from one person to another for equivalent goods or money. So therefore, we can't use traffic. And we don't want to use person. So we are a private man or woman, right? You're not Mr. or Mrs. anybody. You're not Mr. Smith, Mrs. Smith. Mr. and Mrs. are both titles. You don't have a title because the title is assigned to you. And since you want to operate in the private, you are simply you, a private man or private woman. And you're not engaged in any sort of commerce or trade or sale or exchange of merchandise or bills or money or alike, as it's designated here. Therefore, you may be in a bit of a problem if, in fact, you drive a taxi cab for the daytime, and at nighttime you're using your own private automobile or private motor vehicle. So that's what I would designate my property. Instead of calling it a vehicle, I would say it's a private automobile or a private vehicle. That takes away this public commerce stuff, because commerce or trade, sale or exchange of merchandise and bills, money alike. If you say, for example, segregated yourself and said you will not transport people that are of the opposite race or a different race, or the opposite sex, or people that are wearing blue shirts. That would be racist, and you would probably end up with some problems. Therefore, if you clarify your position that when you're not driving the taxi cab or the bus or whatever it is commercially, you are operating in the private. You are not engaged in any sort of commerce. But when you're at work, right, in the case of driving a bus or a taxi cab or whatnot, you would require a driver's license. Now, here's how things work. If you work for a company, let's just say Sainsbury's, you would have a certain set of rules and regulations that are part of your employment contract. If you then change jobs and decide to work for Aldi's, still a grocery store, you would have a different set of rules. The connecting link here is the simple fact that the all uppercase name is a creation from the government, by the government, and when the police officer asks you for your driver's license or operator's permit, you hand them a driver's license or operator's permit, which is the registered property of the Secretary of State, or Department of Motor Vehicles, or Service Ontario, or whatever government entity that created this thing and issued it to you as a license. So let me ask you a question. Let's say, hypothetically, that you have a driver's license and you have a pilot's license. Now, if you're pulled over on the side of the road and the operator says license, insurance, and registration, and you hand him, I don't know, a heavy equipment license, or you hand him a pilot's license, he's going to say, this is not what I requested, and he'll probably hand it back to you, or he'll get very upset with you. Either way, I've made my point. A license is issued and only applicable when and if you're engaged in that activity. You don't need a pilot's license to drive a car, because the pilot's license is to fly an airplane, which technically you're not flying the airplane flies itself, right? Autopilot. But anyway, you need a pilot's license only at that time. You'll only need a driver's license if you're engaged in commerce, or you are for hire, which is technically a form of commerce. I hope everybody sees this analogy and can clearly understand. You have a saving grace, however. The right of a citizen to travel upon the public highway and to transport his property therein by horse-drawn carriage, wagon, or automobile is not a mere privilege which may be permitted or prohibited at will, but a common right to which he has under his right to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. Under this constitutional guarantee, one may therefore, under normal circumstances, travel, notice it didn't say drive, travel, at his inclination along the public highway or in a public place, while conducting himself in an orderly and decent manner, neither interfering with nor disturbing another's rights. He will be protected, not only in his person, but in his safe conduct. Why does it say person? Remember I said there's two classes of persons, one of my earlier videos. A person can be a corporation, which is the creation of the government, the all caps name, or a person can be a living person, what we call a natural person. But I don't think anybody's going to say that a person did not operate a motor vehicle, right? If you made that argument. That case that I was just reading from and this case support the same thing. Okay, Thomas versus Smith, 154. American Jurisprudence, Constitutional Law, Section 329, page 1135. The right of a citizen to travel upon the public highway and to transport his property thereon in an ordinary course of life and business is a common right to which he has the right to enjoy life and liberty and to acquire and possess property in the pursuit of happiness and safety. It includes the right, in doing so, to use any ordinary and usual conveyances of the day and under the existent modes of travel. Includes the right to drive a horse, drawn carriage, or wagon thereon, or to operate an automobile thereon, for the use and ordinary purpose of life and business. So we can see from this designation, they didn't refer to a vehicle, right? It says automobile. So designate your vehicle as a private automobile, not for hire. Okay? Very simple. Here is another case. The owner of an automobile has the same rights as the owner of any other vehicles to use the highway. A traveler on foot has the same right to use the public highway as an automobile or any other vehicle. Now, because vehicle, as we've designated it earlier, which came from Black's Law 4th edition, has certain connotations to it, we're just going to call ourselves a private automobile, not for hire, non-commercial. The United States Constitution, as outlined here, says full faith and credit shall be given in each state to the public acts, records, and judicial proceedings in every other state. This means that if you have a judgment in one state, okay, full faith and credit shall be given in each state, right? Each state of the United States, okay? And then it says records and judicial proceedings of every other state. This means if you find a court case for any reason, whether it's the right to travel or anything else, if you reference it in another case in another state, the judge has to consider it. Okay? This case in particular was January 19th, 2011. Judge May conclusion of law was that the Dallas Police Department and the North Carolina Department of Transportation are both private entities and do not fall within the executive branch of the state government. This decision was upheld in a judicial review by Judge Ridgway. This means that every police department in the country, within the United States, and applies to other places around the world as well, including Canada and the United Kingdom, Australia, and other places. Okay? So it means every police department or government creation, basically, in the country is a private entity. In other words, they are private contractors and private for-profit businesses. So, if a security guard driving an armored car pulled you over and tried to give you a ticket, what would you do? Governments descend to the level of mere private corporations and take on the characteristics of mere private citizens, where private, corporate, commercial paper, Federal Reserve notes, and securities, which is checks, are concerned. For purposes that suit, such corporations and individuals are required as entities entirely separate from government. This is called the Clearfield Doctrine. I've done a presentation a little bit earlier on the Clearfield Trust Co. versus United States. That's the Clearfield Doctrine. It's a case that's been well established, goes back to 1942. What the Clearfield Doctrine is saying is that when a private commercial paper, which means money, is used for corporate government, the government loses its sovereignty and status and becomes no different than a private corporation. The government is bound by the same rules and laws that govern private corporations. So if they intend to compel a living man or woman to some specific performance upon its corporate statute or corporate rules, then the government, like any other private corporation, must be the holder in due course of a contract or some consenting agreement made with full disclosure between it and the one that it's trying to govern of a specific performance, duty, or obligation. Okay? The government is required to enter into the contract or commercial agreement into evidence, due process before trying in a court to enforce its statutory demands. This goes back to that employment with the two different stores, Sainsbury's and Aldi's. Both are stores, both have different sets of rules, and both require an employment contract. Going back to this now, every so-called city, regardless of where it is, every county, every state, or every federal government entity, courts, police departments, taxing authorities, water companies, water delivery outfits, electricity companies, all these people that you can think of are listed on manta.com or Dun & Bradstreet. They're both connected to Dun & Bradstreet and are traded on the stock market. If they're traded on the stock market, you don't make trades on the stock market unless you're there to make a profit. If you're there to make a profit, you are in fact a business. No questions, no nothing. Real governments do not trade on the stock market. Governments are supposed to be there to provide public services that are requested by the people it's supposed to represent, which is you and me. I don't think the current government is representing you or me very good when it's installing all this draconian type of infrastructure, such as ULEZ, or any of these other fines and fees and carbon taxes and anything else. And you can prove that these are for-profit companies simply by looking their numbers up on Dun & Bradstreet. They cannot argue from the point. The right to travel has been well established. No government entity can convert a right into a privilege. And you have the right to, as I said earlier, life, liberty, and happiness. And here are some cases, and by no means is this an extensive list, that supports what I've stated earlier. I thank you for taking the time to listen to this presentation. I hope you found it useful. And as always, it's been brought to you by Denied Truth. Together, we are stronger than apart. It is my hope that with the presentations that I do and the Telegram groups that I basically oversee and dealing with the emails and the like, that together we can come up with a better future than the one we've currently got. I will be doing future videos and presentations as I can afford the time and as the demand dictates. Again, I thank you for listening to this presentation, which has been brought to you by Ripsime Lake and Stan McDonald, the two of us working for Denied Truth. Thank you for your time.